I think particularly when we think of the word entrepreneurship, most people minds tends to go immediately to the idea of startup, right? Creating something new, creating from scratch. And I think over the last few years, for me, I've really come to appreciate that, hey, there are other ways to entrepreneurship. And in my case, particularly, it is entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I would really encourage more young people to consider this path, particularly because if we think about it demographically, 99.9% of American companies are small businesses. And we have this silver tsunami of baby boomers who are retiring. And so if these owners are retiring and they can't sell their businesses, they end up having to shut them down. And that's a huge loss to the lifeblood of our country when you think about how much of that they comprise of, right? And so I really think of this path as, hey, this is my 2 cents contribution to the world. I can acquire and run one small business and basically give it life into the next chapter that I might not otherwise have. And so,
Hi everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Jessica Liang. And Jessica started her journey in the San Francisco Bay Area. Parents had migrated to California, and then went to DL for undergraduate and studied education and political science. And then went on to New York to work in the banking industry in the anti-money laundering arena. And then from there went and got an MBA. Worked for a couple other banks, and then decided to buy a business and started an acquisition club. I think it was some point during college or during your educational experience. And then after graduation and finishing up some of the follow-on degrees, raised some money and graduated and raised a fund to acquire a business. And it's been going from there. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Jessica.
thanks for having me.
Absolutely excited to have you here. So I just gave a quick run through to a much longer journey, but why don't we rewind and unpack that just a bit more? So kind of tell us a little bit about how your journey got started growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, sure. So, born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, my parents are immigrants and classic immigrant story. They came here not speaking English, didn't really have any money, and so I'm forever grateful to the opportunities I've had because of the opportunity to be born in this country. I was a public school kid through and through, so I went to high school in the Bay Area, and since going off to college, have been on a tour of what I call all the coldest cities in the US for the last 10 years, and I just moved back to the Bay Area a year ago. So as you said, I went off and I did my undergraduate degree at Yale, studying education studies and political science. And then I moved out to Buffalo, New York for 3 years. I took a job at M&T Bank, which is headquartered out there, and I was part of their management
Just
development
yeah,
program.
one question to follow that up. So you undergraduate, you did education and political science. Now, how did that link to kind of the financial services banking industry? In other words, it seems like it's a little bit of a maybe a departure. My very limited scope is usually I see people that go into political science education oftentimes would go off to law school or to other forms of graduate school and go that direction. So kind of what pushed in the direction of, hey, after I get the undergraduate degree, I'm going to go work in money laundering kind of banking industry. Kind of how did you make that transition?
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good question. So you're right. I think the first path of go study political science and then go off to DC and go to law school is very much a classic route. I came into grad school wanting to join the Education Studies Scholars Program. And so I was really happy when I got into it because I have a younger brother who has autism. And so for a long time, I thought I wanted to be an educator. I wanted to do something in the education space, particularly in special education. Always thought I was going to end up in doing some sort of policy work in DC. But the abrupt turn to banking really was, I think, a result of getting to campus and kind of getting caught up in the the rush of the herd, if you will. I remember, well, I was the first generation college student here in the United States, and so there were so many things I didn't know going from public school in California and to suddenly, being among the top 1%, the cream of the crop at Yale, right? And
Hmm.
so I remember one day, a stark memory, it was probably about my junior year. I walked onto campus, normal Tuesday, nothing special for me, but I noticed everybody was wearing suits. And standing there wearing my sweats, right? So I look around and I say, "Hey, what's going on? Why is everybody dressed up?" And my classmates told me, "Oh, today is investment banking and consulting recruiting day. Didn't you know?" And I said, "I don't even know what investment banking and consulting is. Like, what is that?" And that's
Hmm.
when I kind of realized that, oh, I was a little bit behind the curve coming into school. Like, nobody had told me these things. Um, but that's where I sort of got into this idea into my head of, oh, okay, maybe I should end up in finance. Maybe I need to go work at the bank. That seems to be what everybody else wants to do. And so by that time, I had missed most of the deadlines, as you can imagine, for the applications. But one lucky bank, M&T Bank, fortunately still had their application deadline open. So I submitted an application for M&T Bank. Had a really great time interviewing and meeting with the folks from there. And so when I got my offer, I said, okay, this is it. I have to go work for a bank. I remember turning down a job offer from Amazon because I said, I have to go work for a bank. This is what everybody wants to do. And that's sort of how it happened.
Now, see, it makes sense. So you say, hey, I'm behind the eight ball, not take what you can get in the sense it sounds like it was a great opportunity, but you'll apply to those that are still available and then start down that path. So you went into kind of doing that banking sector, got into, I think if you said anti-money laundering within the banking industry. Now you did that for 3.5 years. Is that right?
Yeah, so I joined as part of their management development program, and as part of that, they do their best to rotate you throughout the different divisions. So I started off in the anti-money laundering compliance division, and that was super cool. We had a lot of ex-law enforcement folks, people in their second careers there, making sure that no nefarious activity was happening. We're stopping crime within the bank. It was a very feel-good experience. I honestly really enjoyed my time there. And then my second rotation, I joined the credit division, doing more project management. So I helped revamp some of our senior loan committee procedures. And yes, my total time at the bank was about 3 years.
Now, so you did that for about 3 years, and then as you're reaching towards the end of 3 years, if I remember, you kind of went back to maybe do a bit of an MBA, and go in a bit of a different direction. What was kind of the genesis for going back to school, or as opposed to continuing down the working in the banking industry, or kind of was that doing both at the same time and doing the MBA on the side, or kind of walk us through a little bit as to how that played out?
Yeah, I guess there were multiple reasons for going to grad school. I almost didn't go. There was a time when I thought I was gonna be a Buffalo lifer. I'd showed up to Buffalo, didn't know anybody before, had never been there. And Buffalo they don't see a lot of Ivy League grads, they don't see young people, they don't really see that many Asian Americans, and they certainly don't see any Californians. So I show up and everybody says, "Welcome, child. Are you lost? What are you doing out here?" But I really thank Buffalo for being probably one of the best decisions of my career. I mean, had it not, it's not your typical post-college hotspot destination, but I got to be at M&T Bank where my career accelerated very quickly. And outside of that, I was asked to join a social club. So I was hanging out with the who's who of Buffalo, a bunch of people in their 60s and 70s that were really accomplished. I was asked to join the board of directors for two local nonprofits at age 23. I had no business being on these boards, but um, people there were really lovely and they gave me these opportunities. Um, and I also had the opportunity to become a homeowner and a landlord at age 23. And so I had all this going for me in Buffalo. I really loved it. And I think what idea started germinating in my mind was, well, I really enjoyed the work that I was doing at the bank from the anti-money laundering compliance division side. I love the idea of, hey, you can merge business and policy and be able to do financial regulation, essentially. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then applied to grad schools, specifically for the MBA and Master of Public Policy dual degree programs. Um, and then once I got to school, quickly realized, oh no, financial regulators just tell people you can't do this, you can't do that. And I didn't want to be a party pooper for the rest of my career. So we made a big 180 and we went from becoming the rule instigator and enactor to being the rule breaker or the entrepreneur.
Hmm. So now, so how did, or walk us through, how did you kind of, so you kind of shifted gears a bit. Now, how did you get into kind of the entrepreneurial aspect here, or kind of going down that route? Walk us through a little bit. So you're coming out of undergraduate or graduate school, sorry, got the MBA, kind of, or done the banking industry for a period of time. Now, how did you kind of figure out what you wanted to do, or kind of, how you wanted to be the, in quotes, rule breaker kind of a thing, or go down a different, a bit of a different career path? Kind of walks you how that played out a bit.
Yeah, even that was a little bit of a winding journey. So the MBA and Master of Public Policy dual degree at Michigan is a 3-year program, and you start at one school, then you go to the other school for your second year, and then your third year is the half and half. So I started in the public policy program my first year, and I remember stumbling at this point. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, honestly, after realizing that financial regulation was probably not it. I saw this information session that was very cryptically titled Private Equity Firm Headquartered in San Mateo, California. And I didn't know what private equity was at the time. And
Mm.
I'm from the town right next to San Mateo, and I'd never heard of a company headquartered there because it's suburbia. So I show up to this information session, and it ended up being an investor firm that said, "Hey, did you know that you could go raise money and buy a business and run it?" And I said, "What? This is so cool. Nobody's ever told me I could do this before. I really want to try this." And so I
Mm.
ended up interning for that firm my first summer, as well as PIMCO, the fixed income manager. Really loved my time at the search investment firm. And I said, hey, this might be something I really want to do, but I'm going to my second year of grad school, and that's the MBA program. Wouldn't it be a waste of business school to not take advantage of all the recruiting opportunities that exist? Maybe I should get a normal job first and then be entrepreneurial later. And that's how I ended up my second summer. I was at Goldman Sachs in their private wealth management division. And it was a good learning experience, but my big revelation was, man, I love working with all the entrepreneurs and business owners from this side of the table, but it would be way more fun to not be the advisor, but to be the client on that side of the table. How do I do that? Turns out all the clients are business owners. So I said, great, sounds like I need to go buy a business. And so that brought me back into my third year of grad school, where I co-founded the Entrepreneurship through Acquisition Club at the University of Michigan. And we brought a bunch of investors to campus that first year. We hosted our inaugural conference. And through that, I got my classmates excited about this idea of, hey, we can go out and acquire a business and then go become operating partners in it and run the business for the long term. And by that time, I was so deep into this that I said, well, post grad, the path is pretty clear. I've just got to launch out and go do it. So here I am.
Oh, that sounds awesome. So now, one question that you kind of briefly touched on, getting someone, especially if you're, both younger as well as or less experienced in running a business or owning a business, and that to get people to say, hey, I'm willing to come in, give you money, invest in you, and otherwise, kind of roll the dice and gamble on you. Sounds great, if you can get people to do it. On the other hand, being on that other side to get people to have that level of trust or willingness to invest is oftentimes a bit more of a difficult path. So was it pretty straightforward? You just started the club and people were willing to kind of give or take a chance and invest in the money, or was that a longer haul, or kind of had to establish yourself, or kind of walk us through a little bit, how you went from, hey, I've got this idea, I want to go acquire a business, starting a club, to actually kind of building a business around it.
Yeah, I would say I definitely, on the fundraising time, I think I had an easier time than most. I think my experience was more of an outlier because I had started the club. So it took me about 2 weeks to become oversubscribed in my fund. So fairly straightforward for me, but I think that was because I had started the ETA club at Michigan. And so for me, I got a head start in building a lot of the relationships with the investors, right? Remember, I had interned at a search investor firm before as well. And so, through organizing the club and having multiple touch points with these investors, I got to know them, right, and help them host their fireside chats and events they wanted to host on campus. So by the time it came to me to fundraise, it wasn't, hey, you've never met me, please give me money. Instead, it was, hi, you
Mm.
know me, we've interfaced over the last year, we've worked together, you kind of know my working style. I really want to embark on this journey. Will you support me now? And so I feel very thankful that many of them said yes, and have made this path possible for me. But you're right. Conceptually, it is very strange because it's essentially these investors who are giving me money to go shopping and go buy a business. And you're right, I'm young. I'm not super experienced. I don't have a track record. And so for these investors, when they are deciding whether or not to back somebody's search, it really is they're asking themselves these questions of, number one, do I think this person is going to be able to successfully find a business that wants to sell? Number two, do I think this person will be able to successfully complete a transaction? Number three, do I think this person is going to become a competent CEO one day? And so it's both an honor and a privilege, but also a little bit unnerving to know that, these people think I can do it. And I'm sitting here like, oh, I don't know if I can do it, but we'll figure it
Yeah, I
out.
know part of give kind of give you the credit, which I think is rightfully earned. Is it sounds like you also established or did a lot of I'd say groundwork or legwork in establishing those relationships along or beforehand. So yes, in a sense, 2 weeks you oversubscribed, but that was also having established those connections, done some other work with them, or done or been or having those conversations and otherwise kind of laying that groundwork so that when you did do that launch or you went to get people subscribed, it was to a degree they're already having a familiarity with you. Otherwise, they're building up that level of trust. And so, kind of that, I would say, building that groundwork is oftentimes the difference between being able to successfully launch something that is relatively new versus truly going out or sight unseen, people having no familiarity with you makes it a much harder road to go. So I think that definitely makes sense. So now you go out, you say, okay, we've got it oversubscribed, we've got the club or the business going, we're going out. Did you find businesses to acquire? Kind of what business did you acquire? How does it go? In other words, kind of catch us up since you launched to where things are at today.
Yeah, so on average, it takes about 2 years to find a business. I've just hit my 1 year mark, so kind of at that halfway point. I feel pretty good in the last, so I'm still in the search phase, if you will. For me, this is a career path. So post acquisition, I become CEO and I run the company. So I'm really only looking to buy one company. For me, I want to buy one company and I want to run it for the long term. So it really is like trying to find the one, if you will. I'm trying to find a business to marry, but it's got to be the right business. And so you have to be a lot pickier up front. And so that's why there is such a long, I guess, leeway before you do the actual acquisition. But I'd say in the last year, I've gotten close on two deals, and I feel really good about those. Those fell apart, not anything to do with me. It really is kind of situations of sellers getting cold feet, which I totally understand. I mean, if you're a business owner, you've owned your company for 20 years, and all of a sudden you realize, wait, I'm going to retire. No longer going to be at the helm of this. It is so closely tied to their identity that I understand that it can be kind of jarring to immediately separate. And so in one case in particular, the owner had said, hey, I really like you. And I really thought I was ready to retire this year, but I think I want to stay in the business for at least another year or two. Do you want to join as CEO now? And I can give you the option of buying us out in a year or so. And while I was very flattered and that was very kind and very confidence instilling for me, right, to know that the guy um, believed in me enough to offer me the CEO role on the spot right then and there, you know, I I can't be in a relationship with somebody that doesn't want to be in a relationship. They've got to be ready to sell and exit at that time. So I'm still optimistic, still looking, and there's a lot of fish in the sea, but I think the right one's out there somewhere.
No, that makes sense. It is one where jumping in too quickly or to the wrong setup. And whether and it's not even necessarily bad business, but as you said, maybe the owner isn't quite ready to sell, or it's not quite the right setup, or the right relationship, any number of reasons. But making sure that that kind of that almost that business marriage, so to speak, is the right setup. There can be an indicator of a success or failure, depending on if you make sure that the right things are in place. So you kind of started to touch on it, but now if you're to look out and say, kind of looking out in the next 6 to 12 months, is the anticipation that you're going to continue to look for that right business and looking for that acquisition, or kind of lay out a little bit as to kind of where you see the next 6 to 12 months headed for you?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I'm gonna continue looking for that correct acquisition, the right one. And if it's a good fit, the idea is, we'll get the LOI signed, we'll go through the due diligence phase, we'll sign the purchase agreement, and then depending on the specific circumstance with that owner, we'll have negotiated an appropriate transition plan. So in some cases, the owner wants to be out immediately. In case I'll say, all right, cool. Stay with me for 3 months, help me learn all that you know, and then go enjoy Mai Tais on the beach. In other situations, the owner may want to stay on a little longer, up to 12 months. And I can say, wonderful. I'm happy to work alongside you. There's so much to learn from you over the course of this next year. And I think it would be a privilege to be able to do that. And so that's sort of what's on the horizon. And eventually, after that, hopefully, I'll be off and running and able to, carry on the ship on my own.
Well, sounds like it'll be an exciting time. Definitely wish you the best of luck, and I think it'll work out well. So awesome. Well, now as we've reached kind of the present day of the journey, been looking a little bit into the future as to where things might be headed. Great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask towards the end of each episode. So we're gonna to jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Yeah. I like to think of things not as really worst business decisions. I like to think that everything's a learning opportunity. I will say, I think I have made the mistake of spending too long on a few deals, longer than I should have, particularly in my seat where time is my most valuable resource. I don't want to be in the business of convincing somebody to sell their business, right? They have to already be there and be ready. And so for me, it really is important to distinguish early on, hey, is this a serious seller? Are they actually looking to transition and exit their business? Or are they sort of just exploring their options and they just want a free valuation, in which case I need to move on very quickly. And so early on in my search, I think I made the mistake of hanging on too long, hoping that I could be the one to change that person's mind. But that's not my role.
No, it makes sense. It's kind of a balance. If kind of, I don't know, cut bait, but you're in the exploration of an opportunity too soon, you might leave things on the table, or overlook a good opportunity. But by the same time, if you drag things out too long, then you're also utilizing time that can better be spent elsewhere with maybe a different opportunity that may line up better. So it definitely sounds like a balance that you have to continue to figure out what that balance looks like. So definitely makes sense.
Yeah.
Second question now that I'd like to ask is, so now if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think particularly when we think of the word entrepreneurship, most people minds t tends to go immediately to the idea of startup, right? Creating something new, creating from scratch. And I think over the last few years, for me, I've really come to appreciate that, hey, there are other ways to entrepreneurship. And in my case, particularly, it is entrepreneurship through acquisition. And I would really encourage more young people to consider this path, particularly because if you think about it demographically, 99.9% of American companies are small businesses. And we have this silver tsunami of baby boomers who are retiring. And so, if these owners are retiring and they can't sell their businesses, they end up having to shut them down. And that's a huge loss to the lifeblood of our country when you think about how much of that they comprise of, right? And so, I really think of this path as, hey, this is my 2 cents contribution to the world. I can acquire and run one small business and basically give it life into the next chapter that I might not otherwise have. And so there's a lot of businesses that are going to be turning over in the next decade or so. So there's a lot of room for people to kind of come on and continue that succession plan. And so I'd encourage people to think about not entrepreneurship just in the startup sense, but also in the entrepreneurship through acquisition sense.
No, I like that. And I do agree. I think there's a number of ways, it's been interesting. I think we're over 600 episodes and on the podcast, and everybody has a different path. And, I think the idealize or people think, that, hey, I have to have that one great idea and I have to start up from scratch. And for some people, absolutely makes sense and they enjoy it and that there's a thrill bad. There's also a lot of opportunities to acquire, take, or step in, whether it's people who are looking to make an exit or looking for someone to take it to the next level or otherwise, engage with the business. But oftentimes that presents an opportunity and yet it often or may be overlooked or otherwise people don't necessarily explore that option. So I definitely that, exploring the different ways to approach doing a business and the different opportunities there is definitely a great rule of thumb and a great takeaway. So well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, all my contact information is on my website, steadfeather.com. Feel free to email me, find me on LinkedIn, reach out to me via the website. I will be responsive.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection, and if nothing else, make a new best friend. So,
Yeah.
with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners that are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So, just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. Couple more things as listeners, make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we are always here to help. Well, thank you again, Jessica, for coming on the podcast and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thanks so much, Devin. Have a good one.